I was sitting in the observer's gallery the morning they burned Ines Kolova's credentials. That is the correct word for what happened. The Salvari Harmony Accord had its own vocabulary for it. A formal suspension pending compliance review, a temporary administrative withdrawal of representational status, a procedural measure to ensure the integrity of deliberative space. 11 words where one would have done. But the result was the same. They stripped her papers, they revoked her floor access, and they walked her out of the chamber in front of 43 delegations while the arbitration panel recorded the action in the permanent ledger as item 16 on a routine agenda. I watched from the gallery. That was my assignment. Military attaché to the human mission at Salvari, which meant I had no floor access of my own, only a numbered seat above the east colonnade, and a view across the full width of the chamber. The curved tiers of delegate benches, the pale stone of the central floor, the glass dome overhead with its slow drift of cloud and light. I watched them lead Kolova to the exit corridor. She did not look back. Her posture was exactly what it had been when she walked in. Level, unhurried, composed. She carried her materials under her arm, and she let them escort her out, and the door sealed, and the session continued. I stayed for the rest of the session. I had no reason to leave. My orders were to observe, and there was still something to observe. What I was watching was a body that believed it had just handled a problem. The Harmony Accord was not a government. It held no territory, commanded no fleet, issued no binding law. What it held was a registration framework, a humanitarian logistics registry that had been built over 60 years, a single instrument that allowed signatory species to move medical convoys, refugee transports, and aid shipments across contested corridors without challenge. Every civilization that wanted clean passage through unsettled space filed through the Accord's registry. And every civilization that wanted to be taken seriously at any table filed through it too. The registry was the Accord. The Accord was the registry. Take away the registry, and you had a room full of species in ceremonial robes arguing over the quality of their own carpet. Earth had been a signatory for 11 years. Kolova had managed the registration filings for the last 4 of them. The unglamorous, technical end of the work, the shelf of transit authorizations and convoy declarations and humanitarian route certificates that kept human aid movements clean. She had been good at it. She had been, in the estimation of the Accord's own staff, meticulous. The compliance review the arbitration panel cited was not real. I knew this because I had read every line of the filing record before I flew to Salvari, and there was nothing in it to review. The action against Kolova was political. 3 of the 7 panel members had received pressure from the Veth cartel through intermediary delegations. The cartel had found Earth's humanitarian corridor registrations inconveniently positioned across supply routes it wanted to use without oversight. The compliance review was the instrument. Kolova was the instrument's target. The panel calculated that removing her from the proceedings would allow them to delay, refile, and ultimately reroute the registry entries in question while the mission scrambled to send a replacement. It was a clean piece of work. I will give them that. 22 days later, Ines Kolova died on a transit vessel the Accord had arranged to move suspended representatives out of the Salvari system. The official finding was a medical event. It was not investigated. I was still in Salvari when the news reached us. I sent the report home, and I did not sleep for 3 days. Not from grief, though there was grief. From arithmetic. I was going over the filing record again. The 11 years of registration documents, the convoy authorizations, the humanitarian route certificates. I was reading the names on them. Kolova's name was on every major filing from the last 4 years. She had not just managed the process. She had, in accordance with the Accord's own administrative protocols, filed as the named human representative on the underlying registration instruments, the route documents, the ones the convoy authorizations and route certificates derived from. It was a technicality the Accord's own rules required. The named representative on a route registration instrument held the authorization chain until that chain was formally retired or reassigned by the same named representative. Not by the body that had issued the suspension, not by any panel, by the named representative. I went back and read the Accord's own administrative code 3 times before I was confident I had it right. Then I sent the finding to the mission coordinator, and I waited. The answer came in 9 hours. Yes, they said, we know. We have always known. I understood then why the fleet was already in the corridor. I understood that Kolova had not simply been meticulous. She had been building something, a registration architecture in which the Accord's own rules made it structurally impossible to excise Earth from the humanitarian framework without Earth's active cooperation. Every filing she had made, every route document with her name on it, was a brick in a wall the Accord did not know was being built because they had never imagined that anyone would build it using their own administrative code as the mortar. She had started this 18 months before the Accord moved against her. I do not know whether she saw the move coming. It does not matter. The architecture was already complete. The fleet that appeared through the dome that afternoon was not sent in response to her death. The orders had been cut before she was ever escorted out of the chamber. The ships had been in registered transit through humanitarian corridors, corridors filed under Kolova's name, corridors the Accord could not legally challenge without voiding the registry instruments that gave the Accord its only real authority for the better part of 2 months. They were visible through the glass, not because anyone put them there on that day. They were visible because they had always been there, and the dome was simply angled in a way that made it undeniable at that particular hour. I watched the chamber below me realize this. It did not happen all at once. It happened in stages, the way a flood happens, not a wall of water, but a slow, cold rise that you only recognize as a flood when it reaches your knees and you understand that it has been rising for some time. The first delegate to see the silhouettes through the dome touched the arm of the colleague beside him. The movement spread across the tiers. The presiding chair looked up. The chamber went quiet. No message came from the human mission. No statement was issued, no ultimatum, no list of demands. The registry was the message. The fleet in the corridor was the message. The Accord's own administrative code, read correctly, was the message. They had handed Kolova the instruments of their own authority, and she had used them precisely as the rules required. And now they were looking at the consequence of that through a glass ceiling while the session agenda sat unfinished on the central floor. The presiding chair called a recess. The recess lasted 11 days. When the session reconvened, the compliance review against Earth was withdrawn. The withdrawal was listed as item 3 on a routine agenda, between a funding motion and a corridor maintenance report. No explanation was entered into the record. The Accord did not formally acknowledge what had happened. It did not need to. 3 months after that, the Veth cartel intermediaries withdrew from the Harmony Accord entirely, quietly, citing scheduling conflicts. The 3 panel members who had moved against Kolova did not seek reappointment at the end of their terms. The Accord's administrative code was revised the following cycle to require independent verification of compliance grounds before any review could be formally opened. The revision was the Accord's own idea. No one asked them to make it. I have thought about this many times in the years since. About what it cost. About what it was worth. About whether Kolova knew, when she was filing the last of those route documents 18 months before the Accord came for her, that she was building the instrument of their correction and not her own protection, because she must have understood that the architecture would not protect her. She was too meticulous not to have seen that. The registry would hold. She might not. I think she filed anyway. I think that is the kind of weight you can only carry if you have decided, before any of it begins, what you are willing to pay for the outcome you want. Not what you are willing to risk. What you are willing to pay. The Accord still stands. The registry still functions. Earth's humanitarian corridor authorizations are still on file, administered now by a mission coordinator who learned the filing system from Kolova's records. The ships that were visible through the dome that afternoon returned to their assigned stations without incident. They had never been anything other than registered humanitarian convoy escorts. The paperwork was impeccable. It always was.